That's in your fight.
That's the one. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am Darla Clayton. I'm the East Coast Community Engagement and Fundraising Specialist for Angioma Alliance, and we are really excited to welcome Heather Rendulic. She wants to live in a world where everyone feels empowered when they face life's challenges. She knows how hard life can get. As a young stroke and brain surgery survivor, she learned the tools needed to become an overcomer. When she's not working as a human resources professional, Heather is sharing her message of hope as a motivational speaker, mentor, and sharing the art of finding beauty in the chaos. Also joining Heather tonight are her parents, who have been a really important support for her in this process of overcoming all of these difficulties. So welcome also to Randy and Lynn Abramovic. All right, Heather, on to you.
Okay, thank you, Darla, for that wonderful introduction, and good evening, everybody. I'm Heather, and almost 9 years ago, I'll start from the beginning. Almost 9 years ago, I had a random brain hemorrhage that I was 22 years old at the time, and after extensive testing, they found I had a cavernous angioma on my right thalamus, and it had bled. And if any of you are familiar with cavernous angioma, you know that unfortunately, well, especially 9 years ago, now we're making more progress, thankfully, but there was no treatment options for me. Brain surgery was the only known cure, and I was told mine was so deep in my brain that it was inoperable and nobody wanted to touch it. So especially with me being so young, and they said, go live your life and hopefully it won't bleed again. And I was a full-time college student. I was competing in horseback riding, and I went back to school, was living my life. And it was really hard for me, as some of you may know, that the uncertainty of it all, I felt like I had a ticking time bomb in my head. It could go off at any given point in time. Was it going to be worse than the last bleed? Was, it going to kill me? I mean, who knows what could happen? Anything could happen. It was a really hard time for me and my family. My lesion did bleed 5 times over 11 months. The 5th and final brain hemorrhage completely paralyzed the left side of my body. And then I had my doctors at that point said I had to have the brain surgery because this lesion was going to kill me. It was so aggressive. So I did have a 9-hour craniotomy. I woke up from surgery still paralyzed on my left side, and I started one of the hardest but yet most rewarding battles of my life. It was my road to recovery. I had to relearn how to walk and, start living, my new life, I so call it. And then about a year ago, me and my family decided that we really wanted to take my story and write a book to help inspire others, because I went back to college, I graduated with honors, I started a career in human resources. I bought a house, I got married, I'm hoping to start a family one day, and I'm living, as best I can. I still am a little bit disabled. I still don't have much use of my left arm and hand, but I'm very blessed, I'm very fortunate. And my book is titled Headstrong Through Life, Love, and Brain Surgery. And my beautiful parents, who were such a support system for me through this horrible journey, they actually write a couple paragraphs at the end of each chapter giving their perspective as a loved one, not only a loved one of cavernous angioma, but a loved one of somebody going through a tragedy, a trauma, a bad time in their life, and how hard that can be to watch, whether that's your son or daughter, or your spouse, or a friend, or a coworker, whoever it may be. It's very difficult. And the theme of my book is really that we all go through hard times. Obviously, everybody's story is different, and we could each talk about a hard time in our life, and it's not a competition, and I don't even think one is worse than the other, because to that person, their trauma, the hardship they're facing is very significant and impactful. And so we can't control what happens to us, but what we can control is how we react to those situations. And I really want to hone that message for everybody so they know that no matter what they face, that they have control, some sort of control. They might not be able to control the whole situation, but you do have some control. And I really wanted to write the book to help people get that message, especially now. I think people need hope more than ever. And a couple key takeaways that in my book that I like to talk about is mindset and the importance of mindset, and to set your mind for success. So before my brain surgery, I was half my body was paralyzed. I was in the ICU, and the doctors, we didn't know what was going to happen with the brain surgery. I could have lost my life in the brain surgery. I could have become more disabled. Nobody knew, but I set my mind before I went into that operating room that as soon as I woke up, I was going to start fighting like heck, and I was going to do everything in my power to regain my independence. And I actually, one of my favorite stories was I was waking up from surgery. I have tubes coming out of my head, and my family is around my bedside, and my sister, she was crying because it was a traumatic thing to see her sister with all these tubes and machines, and I have this big gnarly gash on my head. And I opened my eyes, still groggy from the anesthesia, and I looked at her crying, and I said, "Oh, quit your crying. I'll be dancing at your wedding," which she was getting married that following year. And sure enough, I was dancing at her wedding. So, but I really believe the mind and body are connected in a way that we don't even fully understand. And I really believe that setting your mind for success, really picturing yourself getting through this difficult time, getting through a stressful work week, getting to your goals, really helps put things in motion. And that you don't have to see the entire path, but all you need to see is the next step. And a second takeaway I would like you to learn is about perspective. And our perspective is everything. I have a young nephew, and watching him grow up and seeing the world through his eyes is just amazing to me, because kids have a different perspective on life than us. I mean, think about it. A child, when it's raining outside, like maybe me as a 31-year-old, I'm going to be like, oh, it's yucky out, and I have to get my umbrella, or I got my shoes wet, or, I got rained on. I don't know, but I'm going to be a little bit, more negative Nancy, so to speak. And my nephew is going to look at that and be like, oh, great, we get to go play in the rain and play in the mud, because he loves to get dirty. And, like, this is awesome. So it's all about the way we view things. And we all need to be grateful for what we do have. And, I'll start off for you, because sometimes it can be hard to find the beauty in our lives, because in those really dark times, it can be very difficult to see the good, because all we can see is the bad. But I really strongly encourage you to try very hard. And this is something you're going to have to do every single day, probably multiple times a day. But I want you to find the good. And one is you're alive. I mean, that's a great place to start for everybody. And there's a reason why you're alive. You have a purpose, and you have a reason to be here. And what you're going through does not define you. However, you can get through this and use it to help others. And that's exactly what I'm doing right now in my life and my career, and starting my business to help people from things I learned from what I went through 9 years ago. And you have gotten through 100% of your worst days this far. So why can't you get through this one? And that's another perspective, is just that this is just take things a day at a time. I don't know what's going to happen 6 months from now. You don't know what's going to happen 6 months from now. But what we do know is right now in this moment, right now, when I'm joining you guys this evening to try and encourage you and give you hope, no matter what you're facing or could face in the future, or maybe faced in the past that you're still dealing with, there's good things in your life, there's beauty to find, and even if it's hard to see, it's there. And people like me now, I just became a certified life coach. I would love to help you find those beautiful good things in your life. The third takeaway is to control the uncontrollable, which, like I mentioned earlier, we can't control what happens to us. So you're going to say, okay, Heather, I can't control that. So how am I going to control it? There is a method to my madness that, what we can control is our reactions. And that's what really makes us, what defines us as a human. And if you think about two people who go through the same situation, exact specifics, but they handle it completely differently. Maybe one person, I don't know, just gives up all hope and says, you know what, like, I'm going to succumb to this. This is going to, ruin me. I'm going to be miserable or, for the rest of my life. And then you have another person who uses it, who grows through it, sees it as a challenge, an opportunity to grow as a person. Which person are you going to look to for inspiration? And, that's a really good point, because that's what we control, is our reactions to what happens to us. And everybody has that control over situations, is your reaction. And this could be something as stupid as the person who cuts you off on the freeway. Someone cuts you off, you might be wanting to flip them the bird, or I don't know what people do these days, but if we choose to react and give them grace, and maybe that person is in a hurry because their loved one's in the hospital, or we don't know what's going on in everybody's, someone's fighting a battle nothing about. And so I want to close by just letting you all know that if you're here because of Angioma Alliance, I'd love to talk to you more about my story with cavernous angioma. And I am out, I'm doing podcasts all the time now to promote my book and my business. And I talk about cavernous angioma. I talk about cavernous angioma to everybody, which I'm sure you do too. But, to raise awareness, because I remember when I got diagnosed, my mom and I were Googling, what the heck is this? And, that thankfully people like Connie were around to, have this wonderful organization, and where we were able to learn more about it, because even some of my doctors didn't really know anything about it at first. I went around the country and met different ones. And I did have one doctor say, oh, I'm going to have to Google that. And I was like, well, okay, we're not going to be seeing you anymore. So, but I'm sure we can all swap horror stories. But my goal and mission now is, to help encourage people with my book, Headstrong Through Life, Love, and Brain Surgery. And I also am doing motivational speaking for churches, organizations, you name it. And as I mentioned earlier, I am now a certified life coach, and I have a coaching program. It's called Becoming Headstrong with Heather. And this program is custom made to tailor to the people I'm coaching, and can be any length of time. I want to help people realize that they need to have the confidence, they need to have the tenacity. They have all of this in their toolkit. I just want people to realize it's there and how to reach it, so they can overcome anything they face, whether professionally, personally, anywhere. So I'm going to hand it over to my parents. They are going to talk about their perspective for a little bit, as going through, what I went through with cavernous angioma, and give some tools and advice for people of, loved ones of people going through hard times. So Lynn and Randy.
Hi, I'm Lynn, or in the book, I'm known as Mom here. So we will, share a little bit. I do want to mention that the book covers not only Heather's experience with cavernous angioma, but it starts as she was a young child. And Heather certainly has been headstrong ever since she was a little girl. That can be a good thing, and that can be a not so good thing for a parent. So the book kind of chronicles her life. And as Heather mentioned, our takeaways are the unexpected is going to happen. I don't know if you're parents or if you also have been diagnosed with an angioma, but certainly that was not in my mom manual. There were drugs, boys, and that type of thing. So when this came out of the blue, I did have past experience in the healthcare field, working at a rehab center, so I knew this was not a good thing. And as Heather goes through her story, I bring in some challenges I had, some, while I was trying to support her, I was also going through, watching my baby possibly die. So there were some dark times, and honestly, I'll tell you the truth. There still are moments that I think to myself, "Why Heather?" But I've come to realize this is some of why Heather, because she has helped so many people and has inspired so many people. And I will say that I agree with her. Mindset is so very important. And I remember often telling her, I don't know how we're going to do this, but we'll figure it out. And we did. And through the support of us as parents and Heather's willingness to work hard. So life's hard. As we all know, there's things that happen, but we can get through them.
And I'm Randy, and otherwise known as Dad here. Heather is an amazing young lady, and we could not be more proud of her, of what she's accomplished and what she's gone through in her very, very young life. And for me as a dad, I had no medical background whatsoever. I'm a marketing guy. We owned a marketing company. And so to me, this was like, oh my goodness, how do you put a plan together to deal with all of this? And but God got us through. And our family, Lynn and I, we're going to be celebrating 42 years this year in September, if we make it. Kidding. But what we did during this period, we had to dig deep and depend on each other. And we realized that where there was points that Lynn was the main hospital. She didn't leave the hospital for weeks. She slept in chairs and on floors and things like that. And when all of it's all started in the end there. And then I went in for periods of time. But this was a very long period. We, day to day, we didn't know what was going to happen or how Heather was going to come out of all this. And we're so blessed that she did. And we're so thankful that she did. But the thing for me was faith. Our faith was strong, but it grew exponentially. Us as a family, Heather has an older sister. She chipped in. Everybody that was in our family just supported us. And then friends. Oh my, how friends, true friends, just stood up from all over the country and did whatever they could to support us and help us, even if it was just little notes or messages just to say, hey, we're thinking about you, praying for you, what can we do? But it all came together.
And at the end, I will mention Randy was very, he wanted to keep people informed. So he did send out periodic notices to family and friends of what was going on. So that's in the index of the book. So it really takes you in depth through what Heather was going through. And I will say, I have to say, yes, this is such a serious subject and it was life-threatening for Heather, but there are also some comical moments. And one in particular, when she was at the hospital shortly after her surgery and was on some pretty good drugs. And I of course was, watching her like a hawk, but at one point she was kind of half awake and I said, oh, your grandparents are coming to see you this afternoon. And she said, oh, tell them to watch out for the bears, especially the brown ones, because they're really mean. Well, I'm thinking, I think the neurosurgeon didn't connect something correctly, but he happened to walk into the room. I knew it was heavy drugs, but he walked into the room at that moment. And I said something to him, and poor Heather is laying there, Mom, I need those. And he knew that too, that she needed that amount of medication. He said, I've seen those bears. So yes.
Yeah, I know that was, I remember that day. And I really believe that what happened was I had a friend come by and visit, and I believe they brought me like a stuffed teddy bear, like a get well soon kind of thing. And that was sitting there, and, a mixture of probably having a brain hemorrhage, having brain surgery, and the drugs. I wouldn't say it's just the drugs, but
No. And you did continue that through rehab too. There was one, they had her left hand on this big wheel so she would move, practice her arm, and she started talking about how she was driving a school bus full of Polish children. Now, where that came from, I don't know. But she had the therapy team laughing. So
again, you gotta find the joy in life sometimes. It's hard to find at times, but you gotta find it. It's there. And I want to end before we go to Q&A. I want to a note I just wrote down that life never goes as planned. We all know that. Probably at an early age, we realized that our plans just never seem to work out the way we expect. And I want you to take this saying with you leaving tonight. So whatever you may face tomorrow, maybe you have your plan for tomorrow. I don't know about you, I'm a planner, and I have my plan for my work day tomorrow, and what I'm going to do, where I'm going to be at this time and that time. And I know something's probably going to happen. There'll be a construction on the way to work, or who knows, but improvise, adapt, and overcome. So the first step is, you hit a roadblock and you have to, an analogy I like to use, okay, your normal typical route to work, it by heart because you do it every day, probably half awake because you haven't had your coffee yet, but all of a sudden that road's closed because it's under construction. And at first you're like, wait, I'm angry because this is going to throw off my whole route, and I don't know what I'm going to do. This wasn't part of my plan. And so you have to improvise, because then you follow the signs they have taking you around the construction, like the alternate route. And so that's you improvising. And then for the rest of the time, while that road is closed, you're adapting, because you're going to know that alternate route. It might take you a little bit longer than your typical route, but it's life moves on. You might leave the house a couple minutes early, so you get to work on time. And then you overcome, because then you get it down to that schedule down to a T, you know your routes, you get to work on time. And then by the time your road opens back up of your old route, you're like, well, I'm so used to this, like, and then you have to start all over again because you have to get used to going back that way. So, and that's true with life. I mean, I'm sure we all can relate to that. And I also want you to, as a daily affirmation, to put the persist in persistence. So, you know, that is what you can control, is if you persist through no matter what you face, no matter what difficulty, and you put the persist in persistence, it starts with you. I know you can do it, and to always be headstrong. So I am now going to open it up. Anybody has any questions about the book, about me, about my cute little dog, anything.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much, Heather and Lynn and Randy. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording so you guys can feel free to chat a little more openly. So I'm going to stop that now, and then we'll get that message again, I think.